Okay, today we're going to be installing the power steering pump on a 2000 Dodge Durango with a 5.9 liter V8 engine. And the first thing we want to do is to disconnect our negative battery terminal. And the reason we want to do that is because there's a good chance that our tools could contact the battery terminal, the positive battery terminal on the side of the battery or on the top. So as a precaution, normally when we are working on a car, we want to disconnect the negative battery terminal before we start to work. And the next step would be to lower our power steering unit into position. And we'll use one of the short studs to hold it in place on the top. Just be careful not to cross thread them. And we'll get our second bolt in, and it's easier to get the two top bolts in first. It's easier to line it up that way. And we'll get our bottom stud in place, which goes on at the left bottom. You'll need to wiggle the bracket back and forth to get that in. And we'll get our fourth and last bolt at the bottom right. Then we'll wiggle the bracket to get it started. And we'll get our air ratchet here to do the heavy lifting. And we're using a 14 millimeter socket, deep socket, or you can use a 9/16 deep socket as well. And 14 millimeter or 9/16 deep socket for the studs. On these we'll need a stubby extension or a couple of adapters to get the clearance here for the pulley. With a semi-long 14 millimeter socket, we were able to clear the pulley here. Just barely cleared it. And we'll get a 14 millimeter deep socket for the studs. And if you have a swivel ratchet like this one, it makes it easier because this area is a little bit confined. And this is a ratchet from Harbor Freight. Pretty nice ratchet. A little plug there for Harbor Freight. with this ratchet, we're able to also use our longer socket because of the swiveling action. Now we're ready for our bracket. Let's not forget to connect our ground wire. And then we'll tighten up the two nuts. And our 14 millimeter doesn't work too good on those nuts for some reason. So we'll get our 9/16, and that fits really good. And normally before we install this pipe has an O-ring, so it's a good idea to replace the O-ring if it's not in good shape, if it's flat and hard. And also before installing it, we usually put on a coat of petroleum jelly, or in this case we used some Permatex high temp RTV silicone gasket maker. This is a non-hardening kind, so it just remains pliable, so it remains kind of like a rubbery material. So instead of petroleum jelly, we coated it with some of the RTV silicone gasket maker. And normally we want to let it skin over until it's tacky before we put it on there. Okay, so now that we let our silicone gasket maker sit for a little while and get tacky, we'll install our pipe. And we'll tighten up our screw, our bolt, and now we're ready to reinstall our serpentine belt. And we'll start by threading it over the power steering unit, and then over the air conditioning compressor, under the idler pulley, and then go over the alternator, making sure it's also underneath, going over the water pump pulley. Also making sure it's going around the crankshaft pulley. Then we'll put it around the belt tensioner pulley, and then we'll use our serpentine belt tool with a 15 millimeter socket. We'll apply pressure in a clockwise direction, and then we keep it taut as we put it over the alternator pulley. And then over the belt tensioner pulley. you can do it either way. Usually a little easier to put it over the belt tensioner pulley last. So either way, either the belt tensioner pulley or over the alternator pulley. You want to make sure everything is aligned correctly, that it's riding inside all the pulleys, not riding over the edge, the edges. And then you let go the tension on the belt tensioner, and there it is. And most of these cars have a neat little diagram that is very helpful in case you forget how to actually install it. There it is. It's usually in the front left of the engine, or I should say front right, front passenger side. We'll proceed to install the high pressure line. Make sure that it goes in straight and you don't cross thread it. It's kind of tricky because of the weight from the hose. Here we go. And then we'll reinstall the low pressure return line. Then we'll get our clamp. And we'll proceed to tighten both of these connections. Okay, so we'll finish tightening our pressure line and our return line. And we'll tighten our clamp on our return line. And you want to get it tight, but not too tight. For those of you out there that don't know your own strength, if you do it too tight, you can split the clamp, and then you'll have to get a new one. Okay, and that's about it. We now need to refill our power steering reservoir, and we want to fill it to the cold mark. And then we'll fill it to the cool mark, and then once run the engine, and once it gets hot, then we'll want to take it to the hot mark. So we'll check it again, and if it's not at the hot mark, then we top it off. And the only other thing we need to do is to reconnect our negative battery terminal. And we always want to reconnect our negative battery terminal. Always disconnect our negative battery terminal first and reconnect it last. That way we minimize the risk of creating a short circuit with the tool if we were doing it with the positive battery terminal last. And that concludes this video. Hopefully this video was helpful, and please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Thanks for watching, and as always, try to stay clean. Just try.